It's not much of a secret that I like to use 4-letter words that are frowned upon. You have been warned. Content is not suitable for all listeners.
Welcome! You're listening to Bewitched Banter.
I'm Krista, and I believe that people are inherently shitty.
And I'm Amy, and I tend to believe that people are naturally good.
But ironically, I'm a super believer in the supernatural and all things spiritual.
And I'm a total skeptic.
We're best friends, and in this podcast, we're seeking to explore and understand each other's perspectives with deep dives into the spooky, the spiritual, the magical, and the mystical.
And some straight up spoofs.
Today, we are covering Secret Society stories.
Yes, I'm ready to hear. We'll be kicking it off with the Freemasons and then the Molly McGuires.
Yes.
So Krista's going to take the lead today.
Yeah, I'm got a little personal anecdote before I dive into my actual story.
You are a Freemason.
I am not, but my grandfather, Paco, my dear grandpa that passed away several years ago now, who everyone adored. He was just a gem of a human, but anyhow, apparently he was a Freemason. And I asked my dad about it. I was like, Dad, did Grandpa ever talk about it or whatever? And he's like, no, he kept it that secret. So my grandpa kept with the code. Good job, Paco. But he did apparently give my dad a ring, which my dad cannot find. But it was like a black ring with like a black eagle or hawk or something. So I have some type of memorabilia somewhere.
So is that their symbol?
No, they have... Well, it's one of them. They have several others and secret handshakes and shit that we don't know because it's secret. But yeah, one more part of that anecdote is that I remember at his celebration of life service in Hyde Park, New York, there was a gentleman there who was like an older veteran type guy, and he was ranting and raving about how we didn't properly bury my grandfather. And I'm pretty sure he kept saying, he's a Freemason, this is the way he needs to be buried, not like this. And made a
Wait, this happened at the funeral?
Yeah, my grandfather was cremated, so it was like his celebration of life ceremony.
So someone came there and was yelling this?
Yes. I'll never forget.
What'd your family think about it?
My dad was too involved, doing all his, eulogies and stuff. And my aunt was who basically was my grandma and grandpa's caretaker at the end of their lives, was busy running the show too, right? So they didn't hear any of this. I asked them, I was like, you guys, did you hear that guy ranting about grandpa not being buried properly? And they're like, what are you talking about? But I think my sister and cousin saw it too, and there's this, he was a larger old man, and he was following us down the hallway after we did our what do you call it, the concessions, or the greeting line when you
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
you go and give your condolences.
Reception line. Yeah, that's it. And yeah, he was following us down the hallway of this little church, and I was like, what the fuck is happening?
That's creepy.
Yeah, and I was like, well, maybe he was involved in something weird and
yeah,
secret.
He might have been.
So,
or the guy was just really old and senile.
It could have been
one of the two.
One of the two, but. My dad has this ring somewhere, and he's got to dig it up because I'm very curious about it. And then apparently on my mom's side...
Would it be worth anything?
I don't know.
I'd be just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a great question. Probably not. But apparently then on my mom's side, so dad's German, mom's Irish, Italian, Lithuanian, you name it, Scottish, mutt side on mama's side, but her great-grandpa, or grandfather rather, was apparently Freemason as well. Which tracks with what I'm about to tell you, because on my mom's side, we were here since the Revolutionary War, and so there's a lot of pride and roots at that level.
Okay.
Of Freemasonry.
It's interesting both sides.
Right? I'm like,
Did the Freemasons put your family together?
Maybe. They did. They ordained my parents. Okay, so while you touched on Freemasons, before I get into because I have a wild story to share about them. Before we do.
Personal?
No, It just involves an 1800 story of a mysterious disappearance.
Okay.
Yeah, which I was like, whoa. Speaking a lot to the mystery shrouded around the secrecy of the secret societies that we discussed. But just a little bit of background. Freemasons, like I said, a lot of famous ones, and you mentioned this too. They're found throughout history, all the way back from George Washington. He was a master mason, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. Benjamin Franklin was a founding member of the first Masonic Lodge in America. And then we have Franklin D. Roosevelt, Gerald Ford, Prime Minister of Great Britain. There's Winston again, Winston Churchill.
Oh, Winston Churchill?
Yep. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Oh, Mozart. I didn't know that was his full name. There you go.
I didn't either.
Mozart. And Henry Ford, Davy Crockett, Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, Paul Robeson, and astronaut even Buzz Aldrin. So a lot of American famous talented folks.
Yeah, definitely.
Up in the mix.
And lots of people with money, probably.
Exactly. And power. Mm-hmm. So what the hell are the Freemasons? What do they stand for? What the fuck is the actual secret? What do they do? Like you said, still a little mystery, not shrouded in who they are, because we know they exist, but the what they do is still kind of like what goes on in those temples. Still questionable? Yeah, unless you're part of them. So the origins are from the word Mason, right? What is that? Well, in the early 13th century, we have people that were very talented artisans in stone masonry. Very important to build things back then. And in the Middle Ages, there was lots of guilds for stonemasons and cathedral builders. This was in Great Britain and in Scotland.
That reminds me, I don't know if I missed part of my notes or I didn't put it in, or I forgot to mention it. A lot of the guilds in the medieval times were actually secret societies for economic benefits.
Yes, and Freemasons were one of them.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yes, ding ding.
I must have left that. Somehow I think I skipped over that.
Yeah, I'll get to that actually, so no worries, I got you covered. So in the Middle Ages, there were these guilds, right? And it was, think of it more, they weren't secret really, they were just more like trade associations, essentially, right? Like my Public Relations Society of America that I had an event for on Tuesday, and then I am the immediate past president of the Phoenix chapter. Not secret by any means, but it's a professional organization where other communications strategists and professionals can come together and talk shop, if you will.
Well, they're like more people like craftsmen.
Yeah, and so
they like had a trade.
Guilds. We're like tradesmen, very expert tradesmen, mind you. I mean, shit, if you're building a cathedral, damn right you're expert artisan. And again, so think of it like today, professional organizations, but they were back then clubs for very skilled laborers, like you said. The very first documentation of Freemasonry was in the 13th century in a poem called the Hallowell Manuscript. And again, it contains the earliest reference to them, and it was published in 1390. So we know what the word Mason means. And you work with stone. Free. Where does the free part come from? Well, back in the Middle Ages, there was the feudal system, meaning you owed the king in the land of which you worked your life, essentially. So, but the Freemasons were essentially that. They were free people, free men. And then,
meaning they didn't have to work for the king?
Right. They were not bound to one land or king.
Okay, interesting.
So they were free to explore really cool ideas of philosophy and art and politics, as it'll get into and morphed into. So even back then, children studying to be a master mason would be fluent in languages, math, philosophy, truly Renaissance men, if you will. And by the 18th, and then they were teens studying all these cool things on top of their trade of masonry. They would then become a journeyman in their teens, probably crafting their actual stonework. Yeah. And then a master mason as an adult. And then once they became a master mason, they garnered a fuckload of respect from other men and people in power. Okay. And then, you move into the 17th and 18th centuries, and the guilds, as you mentioned, morphed into modern Freemasonry. And we see Masonic temples being built in honor of King Solomon's tale. And I don't even know what that entails, but it's something from the Bible.
I talked about King Solomon in the first episode, I think.
Our very first one?
Yeah, I think King Solomon reached out to, in the Bible, a witch to predict like some kind of future event or...
Oh, look at all of this.
Yes.
These ties to predictions.
I only know King Solomon, not from the Bible, but through our podcast.
Love it. Same, actually. I mean, I've heard of him through my brief Catholic studies, but anyhow, that's where they founded their beliefs from.
Okay.
It still exists, again. It has a very strict codes of conduct and rituals. But in 1717, we see the first Grand Lodge open in England. So if you think about the Grand Lodge in England, think of that as the governing body or like the capital of Freemasonry. And then the lodges around the world are branches of that capital, if you will. I thought it was important to just go over some of this brief history before I get into the story I have. So sorry, it's a little longer than usual, but there was, like you said, a little bit of a split that came through later on in the 18th centuries because some refused to believe that they must believe in a higher power, which obviously the Roman Catholic Church was like, F you, if you don't believe in a higher power, then you're out. So the Roman Catholic Church actually banned Freemasons from being Catholic.
So is that what caused them to be secret?
No, they, I think, became underground because they had a lot of hands and power in behind-the-scenes politics.
Okay.
Which I'll get to in my story. So we have the Continental Freemasonry, which allows for political discussion in their temples. And then we have Anglo-American Freemasonry, which does not allow political discussion. So again, they're saying that this chasm actually caused so much drama among the split that it may have even sparked the Mexican Civil War.
Wow.
Because their hands were in everything around the globe. Kind of shitty that these men couldn't get along and they caused a fucking war. No surprise, men.
Yeah, it's always men.
Fucking men. Anyhow, there are rules. It is very largely patriarchal, which you did allude to in your history. However, there are some women's lodges around the world. There are codes of conduct, and that you are expected to learn all of as a Freemason. Rituals. You need to know all their rituals. You need to know their history, and you need to know Freemason symbols. You must give the Grand Master, who's basically essentially the leader,
like the president.
Yeah, exactly. Their due respect, so much so that you must know where to stand in relation to them, in relation to your level of masonry.
Like physically? Wow. I wouldn't want to be a part of that.
Yeah. They even said, one person from this article said, almost like school, where you have to stand in the right place, you got to wear the right clothes, stand when you speak, and don't speak don't speak while others are talking, turn off your phone. Essentially, just be respectful to not only the master, but anyone talking.
I can understand, historically why people would be attracted to these groups, but now modern day, I'm like, no.
Right.
I don't want to follow some dumb rules about I have to stand some distance from some person like they're better than me.
Right.
No,
fuck that. So this is the levels. So you enter this society as an apprentice, again, of which you're supposed to, even at that level, scour the codes of conduct and rituals. You got to know it to move up. And then you become a fellow craft, and then you become a master Freemason.
Do you know what your granddad was?
I don't. My dad seemed to not know much either, because my grandfather kept...
Did he leave the group?
I don't know.
So you don't really know much about it at all?
Speaking of secrets, there's so much mystery around Paco's involvement.
I would just want to know. It's so interesting.
It really is. And he was a prolific writer, my grandfather, and none of us found anything in his poetry that relates to it at all. Unless there's symbols in there that we just don't know because we're not Freemasons. It's bizarre.
I just it's curious. I'd be curious to know how active he was in the group, how involved.
Yeah, I mean, this is going into the family history, maybe a little too much, but apparently there were some Sunday afternoons where he would just be gone for hours. We think he was having an affair, but maybe he was at the Masonic lodges. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, essentially, what the fuck do they do, right? Still pretty shrouded in mystery what goes on behind the doors there, but the little that they are able to distill, or outsiders are able to distill, is it's a really weird cross between a graduation ceremony of like you're leveling up in the organization, a TEDx talk, and a business meeting.
Okay.
So like, no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
But one comment that I really did appreciate was that they got an anonymous quote from a Mason that he said, or she, probably he, deep and unfettered conversations on philosophy, science, arts, society, psychology, governance, foundational text are very rare these days, especially in the US and Canada. So true. And I respect, if that's actually what they talk about in these lodges, I'm all in. Because
I could see it being like from a lens of elitism.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. Maybe not.
I mean, if they're mostly people of power and of money.
You're so right.
And I wonder if it was like racially, was it all white people typically?
It's great point. Yes, I have a point in here that while it is open to anyone, including some branches that actually allow women, God forbid, it and there's a very, very famous, as I mentioned, Duke Ellington, famous Black artists involved in the order. Apparently, most of the population's white Anglo men.
Okay.
So
I mean, I think that's interesting to have those conversations, but I wonder if it'd be like an echo chamber.
Oh, probably. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I mean, but we're all guilty of that.
Oh, for sure. We are. So, again, secret codes. You're expected as a Mason, even as a journeyman, to recognize another Mason, even when you're not in a lodge or a meeting. Like in public, you're supposed to know secret symbols that identify you as such.
Like a secret, like you would do like a wave and they would know?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then so whatever
or
symbol or gesture
yeah.
or handshake. Yep. And then each level that I mentioned earlier has its own password. So you would know what level you're at.
Oh, okay.
So finally, for my little segment here on what and who these folks are, new members must be interviewed, you must pass a background check, and you must get voted in.
Well, is it usually by invite only? I'm assuming?
Yes, I believe so. But honestly, the recruitment, I think, to your point earlier in history, is that it's like way down because it's now seen as just old white men talking about boring shit. So they have a recruitment problem. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're going to be secret, you can't go around being like, ayo, join
yeah,
our
but
shit.
how did they used to get other people to join? I know like through the guild, but...
Yeah, that's a really great question. I honestly, I don't know. I think it was probably just through word of mouth being a certain elitist member of society. If you have...
Well, it's probably like your circle. Like
Exactly.
If you're the president, you're going to be probably around very powerful people thinking they would fit your group.
Right. And that's more or less what I'm going to discuss a little bit, because there was a time when these men had a fuckload of power. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take us now to that said power and trying to get that power checked to a disappearance case involving a Freemason.
Mm.
And by the way, this disappearance has to this day never been solved.
Wow.
So I was like, oh shit, I'm in. All right, we're going to the 1800s. Are we ready for this?
Yes, I'm ready. I love a good mystery.
This is a phenomenal article from the History Channel, or history.com. The headline is, "One man exposed the secrets of the Freemasons. His disappearance led to their downfall." Article is by Martin Stezano, written in 2018. But are we ready to hear what happened to William Morgan?
But we don't know, do we?
Well, we know a little bit.
Okay, I'll let you get
But we
into
don't
it.
know where he went or how he died.
Okay.
Necessarily. Which, here we go. All right. So it's September 1826, and a New York stoneworker named William Morgan went missing from his local jail. Morgan was just an average dude, like worked doing his thing, even known as being a drunk or a drifter. Mm-hmm. But he did move his family to New York, and somehow this dude infiltrated the secret society that was the Freemasons. he did so even as a drunk, apparently. Get it, Morgan.
So he's a
high-functioning alcoholic. Yeah. He, as the years went on, he got to see some things he didn't like. Essentially, what I gleaned was that he was seeing that the Freemasons were taking over every facet of politics in New York, and was like, no, you can't do this. This is unethical. So because of that, he threatened to publish a book exposing all of their secrets and all their tactics, of probably recruitment being one of them. However, the Masons didn't like this very much, you can imagine, because they had that power. Once you had it in America, you don't give that shit up. We know that story. Tale as old of American time. So they began...
World's time.
Yeah, truth. World's time. They were harassing him to stop the publication of this expose. And so he was thrown in prison on bullshit charges, essentially.
Well, they probably knew people in the system, too.
Exactly. And we'll get to that. But he was, ironically, bailed out by a group of Masons. However, he was never to be seen again after he was bailed out.
So they probably murdered him.
That's what I'm thinking. You know my crew trying. I was like, boop, 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 boop.
Well, if they picked him up and he was never seen again, it's kind of like, well, all signs point to murder.
Yeah, for sure. They did sleeping with the fishes. Hey. Yeah, so this story made me think of the Masons as more of like the mob than this elitist society.
That's scary.
And at one point...
mobs are technically secret societies.
Oh, you're right, because there's Omerta and the Mafia, which is our code of silence. You take this to your grave.
The Mafia, they're still secretive, and they do secret...
Yeah, they have a secret ritual,
I guess,
too.
like, from my history, more what I learned is secret society doesn't necessarily mean the group's secrets, that they share secrets between them.
Yes, exactly.
So a mob would technically be a secret society.
Most def.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love mob stories. I want to do that.
It's so dark, though.
It is, but I love it. I love dark shit. Mm-hmm. Okay, so poor Morgan gets thrown in jail just because he's trying to be a truthsayer, whistleblower, which I fucking respect. Get it, dude? Like, speak truth to power and hold these mofos accountable. So, of course, since he never is seen again, people are like conspiracy ears wide open and up, and it fueled an Freemasonry sentiment against the public, or the public against Freemasonry. We're like,
Well, that makes sense if you think they're members who will kill you if you come out with their secrets. Like, basically, they would be the enemies.
Yes, exactly. And so because of this anti-sentiment and the backlash I'll tell you about here shortly, the movement against them, it changed American politics forever, because it got the Freemasons out of politics that they were had all their fingers in.
Oh, because probably politicians wanted nothing to do with them.
Exactly.
Because you probably were seen as, like, being dirty, or, like, not even dirty, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you're up to, like, no good, basically, if you're associated with them, or you're evil. And
Yep, exactly. So as I covered a little bit in my history, the Masons started out as not evil, just doing their thing as a guild. But
that's, like, most groups, though.
I know.
Because a lot of groups, like, even cults, like, start out with most of the time. Majority of the time, actually. I think most of them seem like they have a good intent, and then things transpire and things go differently than planned. Mm-hmm. Or it's like we keep saying, every group, there's always going to be, like, the bad apple.
Always. So again, as I said, the colonies started showing up with Masonic lodges in the 18th century, very quickly swept through the country and the colonies at the time, and had a lot of power and influence, as I said. And they played a huge role in U.S. politics. 13 of the 39 signatures, by the way, on the U.S. Constitution were of Freemasons.
Wow.
Makes sense. But that's how embedded they were in early revolutionary times in the founding of our country, the bedrock of it. And that was the 1700s, obviously. But by that time, by the time Morgan disappeared, it was the 1820s. And the Masons were, again, at every level of our nation's economic, political, and social circles and hierarchies, elitist, like you said. In New York, it was incredibly the case, even more so. So, Morgan had a partner in crime, no pun intended, David C. Miller, who was a local newspaper publisher. He was going to be the partner in publishing this expose. And Miller, who's the publisher, was like, well, shit, I need to get more views, man. I need to get more likes up in here. He needed readership because his publication was going in the tank. And so they were like, well, shit, let's garner interest by bringing these Freemasons to light. Let's expose them for who they are and how much they, whether it's positively or negatively, influence American politics. The two men entered into a partnership again to print this book, and they were going to really try to expose what the hell these people are up to. So Morgan gained access to the lodge, again, undercover, and to write this book, and documented several of the organization's like weird ceremonies and induction rituals, most of which were like really like vanilla as we would see them today, but back in the 1800s they were like, oh shit.
Do you have any examples?
They didn't even give any because it was like so vanilla. It just said that they were like shocking to the 18th century audience. Okay. But
they show their ankles, heaven forbid.
Make me a sandwich. Bitch. That's never gonna get old for me. I love it so much. Flash that ankle. Oh look, here's my beautiful swollen ankle for you.
Yeah.
Right now. You want a piece of that? I may or may not have fractured my ankle, y'all. I think we covered this last week, but yeah, good times. All right, back to Freemasons. So Morgan's in there, getting infiltrated, getting the intel, trying to write this book, and as the publication date approached, the Masons began a huge harassment campaign against him.
And sure, like a smear campaign.
Yep, and it sounds like physical and legal, at the end. So, as you mentioned, great foresight, police officers and law enforcement were so loyal to the Freemasons that, and probably were themselves, actually.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They probably had members of, like, a lot of people in the community who had power. They were probably Freemasons. Like, so the police, oh gosh. Like, the whole system was probably messed up.
Some things never change.
Yeah, exactly.
Some things never change. All right, so because they're being in all of law enforcement, they jailed Morgan and Miller for quote-unquote outstanding debts. So that was the bogus charge they got them on.
Oh, okay.
And on September 8th, a slew of drunken Masons tried to destroy the print shop of Miller, where he had his publishing agency. And then, if that wasn't enough, it was set on fire 2 days later.
Do you know if they had the original print?
That's a great question. I bet you that's where it was housed. God damn. And think about the artisanship that actually went into stamping.
But do you know if all of it was ruined? Or you don't know?
I don't know. I don't think it ever got published.
Okay.
That I know. Because the news would then become the murder or disappearance. Well, alleged murder. But for sure disappearance of Morgan. So
it's either he fled for his safety or they murdered him.
I'm going with the latter.
Me too.
So that wasn't enough. On September 11th, Masons showed up at Morgan's home with the arrest warrant for this bullshit larceny charge. And
imagine how scary that would be, though.
That is.
I would be so paranoid if all these men of, like, power were after me. I'd be like, I'm screwed. Where do I go? Because you couldn't even go to the police because you probably, like, they're infiltrated the police or anyone I can go to.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I couldn't imagine. So as soon as he got to jail, the charges were dropped because they were such bullshit. But guess what? They immediately arrested him again for another bullshit debt of a whopping $2.56.
Hey, that was a lot of money back then, though.
I guess it was, but...
Because how much was... I mean, I wish I knew the
Here, let me
equivalent.
see. It's actually not that much. Was
like $10, $20?
$40,
Oh.
roughly.
Okay.
But maybe $40
More than $2, though.
Yeah, exactly. You could buy an actual meal with that.
Yeah.
Versus one nugget.
Yeah.
So he wasn't not unlike the spoof on TikTok you showed me, like Anna Delvey not paying for her McDonald's nuggets.
Oh, and she's referring to inventing Anna for people who don't know what she's talking about.
I'm a little obsessed with that right now. If I just binged it. But anyway, so he's in jail again for $2.56. And then, late at night, he was bailed out by the Masons. And one of the lead ones was named Lawson, and he apparently was the mastermind of this kidnapping. So sad. Morgan was hurriedly into a carriage, taken away, never to be seen again.
Damn,
and the last word
tragic.
anyone heard him utter was, ooh. Guess.
Help.
Close.
Stop.
Murder.
He yelled murder?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So that is the very sad and still mysterious disappearance of William Morgan, the man who brought down Freemasonry. Because since he did that, you know, there was a huge, as I alluded to, just a little quick more background, there became actually the very first third American political party called the Anti-Freemasons. And so because of that, they scampered out all the Freemasons that were in politics.
So their whole effort of trying to hide all their secrets really backfired on them anyway.
Yeah.
Like, they should have just let the secrets probably come out unless they were... Because, like, them murdering him, which we don't know for sure. But it still backfired on them.
We don't know for sure, but we know for sure.
And it was like the end of kind of... It wasn't the end, but it was like the downfall of their party.
Yep.
And I'd just be curious if their secrets got out, would that have been the downfall of their party? Like, the same consequences?
That's a great question. I feel like not as badly.
But we don't know what they do in secrecy.
That's true. Who knows? Probably
They maybe have killed countless people. Who knows?
Oh, shit.
So maybe that's why I killed him. Like, I guess...
Oh, my God. Jeffrey Epstein was murdered by...
No, I'm just curious, like, how bad their secrets were that they would be willing to murder. And the murder...
Trump's not smart enough to be a Freemason, I don't feel like. Sorry.
I don't really know if intelligence is involved in those groups.
Well,
I'm sure there are some...
and Freemasons, I think they were very intelligent.
Some of them, not all of them. I don't think everyone has to be... I'm sure they had smart people in the group, but I doubt all of them were that smart.
Yeah, who knows? Secret. It remains
we'll
a
never
mystery.
know.
Well, that was my story. So I'm going to toss it over to you for yours. I'm super stoked about Molly McGuires.
So my secret society I'm covering is the Molly McGuires. Which,
awesome.
Again, I was on pronounce.com learning how to speak English because I did not know how to say it.
Well, are they related to just, maybe you'll get to it. Sorry, I'm just very fascinated by anything mob culture. To the IRA?
No.
Okay, never mind.
And then earlier I referred to you, this is Angela Ash's Sad. Did you know what I was talking about?
I had no idea. I was like, question mark?
Do you know the book?
I don't.
Okay, I'll talk about it.
Yeah, tell me what it is.
Let me get into my story because it will make sense in a little bit.
Okay.
But if anyone knows Angela Ash's, I remember my mom, I vividly remember my mom having the book and watching the movie, and what a tragic movie. To really have a deeper understanding, we really need to have an understanding of what was socially and politically happening at this time to understand their motives.
Okay.
So the group originated in Ireland in the 1840s.
Okay.
And they're actually an offshoot of two other secret societies in Ireland. And the two secret societies they're an offshoot of is the White Boys and the Ribbon Men.
Oh, geez.
Well, I thought the same, but the White Boys isn't really racially, what's the word, influenced or,
Okay.
I didn't want to say sponsored. You know what I'm saying? It's not aspired. I don't
Sponsored
know.
by the White Boys.
No, but they were nicknamed that because they would often wear white smocks during their nightly raids.
Whoa. Okay, so side note, sorry, back to my grandpa. He would wear a white smock because he taught art. I can't believe I never told you that. My same grandpa that was a Freemason wore white smocks all the time. So
Because he was a Freemason or just randomly wore them?
No, he taught art classes. Okay. And so he was somehow became known as Paco, but because of that smock. But anyhow, that was a weird connection in my brain.
But yeah, so it's not anything about race. It's about what they were wearing.
Okay.
Which I didn't know how to articulate a second ago. But these two groups started because they were forced to work in terrible working conditions.
Oh, right. Because labor back then was literally like awful.
Well, yeah, we're going to get into it at length.
Oh, God. Can I handle this?
And these groups were made of like the working class, and they were basically rebelling against their landlords who were evicting them because they were charging them like rents they couldn't afford.
Okay.
Basically what every millennial is feeling right now. But this was, a lot of this stems from the great event called the Great Potato Famine.
Oh, yeah.
And this is when more than 1 million Irish citizens immigrated to America.
Well, and it was strategically planned, if I'm not mistaken, by the British.
I'm going to get into it.
Am I right?
Well,
okay.
Not necessarily, no.
Oh.
Well, they have a part, but I'll get into it. So the Great Potato Famine, and people also call the Great Hunger, which actually, so this is why I said it was Angela Ash's sad, because the movie and the book portrays the famine.
Oh, God. Okay.
Which is a very depressing, sad movie.
Fuck. You warned me. Here we go. Here we go.
But it began because in 1845 is when a fungus spread all through Ireland. And this infestation ruined about 50% of the crops and up to 3/4 of the crops in the next 7 years. So over 1 million Irish citizens starved to death during the time. God. And 1 million residents, like I said earlier. I didn't realize
it was that many.
Yes, it's a very tragic historical event.
Fucking shit.
Yeah.
And 1 million? Especially for the 1800s. That's so many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's something we didn't, at least in my history class, we might have skimmed over it.
Yeah, skimmed right on over that part of my history. Holy shit.
Yeah, so I think it's something we skimmed over because I knew how awful it was, but I didn't know the extent.
Right, same. Wow. Okay. Sorry, I'm feeling my Irish ancestors right now. Like, wow.
Yeah, and this actually also led to 1 million residents also immigrating and leaving the country because of the food shortage, right? And before the potato famine, the working class and 1/3 of Ireland diet was they only would eat potatoes.
Right.
And this was because a lot of them, like I said earlier, couldn't afford land and they would live on small lots. And potatoes can grow in any type of soil. So you basically don't need a nutrient dense soil. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times if you're a gardener, you probably know this, you have to add nutrients to your soil. You can't just keep farming in the same little spot over and over again because the plants absorb the nutrition. I'm acting like I'm an expert gardener, but anyway.
I know. Oh wow. Well, Amy's a botanist now.
I have aspirations of being a gardener, and I've read a lot about it.
But she's got some plants, some real ones, some good backyard plants and front plants.
I know, but I always feel like I want to garden, but when I start reading about it, I get overwhelmed. I'm like, fuck it.
Well, I thought you were going to build yourself a little herb garden.
I'm going to one day.
Oh,
I'll start with the herb garden, then I want to graduate to vegetables.
Veggies?
Yeah. They also, because they had such they took the job, a lot of them were working these labor intensive jobs. So some of them were eating up to 40 to 60 potatoes a day.
Oh my God.
And I was thinking about it, I was like, what? But then I was like, oh yeah, you have those smaller potatoes.
Plus that's all they're eating, you know.
The Brits obviously have a evil history. They've always had a deep-rooted hate towards the Irish Catholic people. Which made up the majority of the population of Ireland.
Yep.
And during this time, during the potato famine, the British were governing Ireland. And so most of the people who owned the property were actually British, not Irish people.
Right.
And so the Irish Catholic people were working on the farms, and they're like paying these absorbent rents to keep a roof over their head.
Yeah.
And so when the crop started to fail because of the fungus infestation, the British took basically care of their own and abandoned the Irish people.
That's what I thought. Okay, I knew there was some like bad blood, but the British did. Yeah.
So the British had the Irish, where there was no food, they had them export huge quantities of food to take care of the British. And they also, what was left of the food, they raised the prices that the average working man couldn't afford. And also
inflation right now, fuck.
And also they said the amount that they were exporting to England went up significantly when Ireland was going through this famine.
Wow.
So tragic, like I said, over 1 million people starved to death, which is like hard just to even wrap your head around.
I can't even. I truly can't.
So back to the Molly McGuires, right? So several of them fled Ireland during the potato famine and immigrated to the United States. And the majority of them settled in Pennsylvania. But they quickly found out like they had high hopes of starting a new life. But unfortunately, the hatred they faced from the Brits also followed them in the U.S. Because you have to think about who was colonizing the U.S. English people, right? Mm-hmm. They often found hometown signs hanging from stores, and they said something along the lines like, Irish need not apply.
Oh, yeah. I knew all about that from my Irish history.
And this basically forced them to take jobs that no one wanted, which obviously immigrants are still dealing with today.
Oh, yeah.
Like working in like Tyson chicken factory and where else? Like farms, you know what I mean? Any job.
Migrant farm workers. Mm-hmm. You know?
I mean, it's tragic also what people put up with, like working in those like meat factories.
Ugh. Amazon, for fuck's sake.
Mm-hmm. Mining was known to be, like, we've all seen the movies, exhausting and a really dangerous job. And they're being paid unlivable wages for this reason, and they had to live in housing that was provided by the coal companies. And in these communities, there were stores, and they were also owned by the coal companies. They were forced to shop there, and they would buy their food there, their mining supplies, and I mean, really anything they need to survive, because they're not being paid shit, so they can only buy the essentials. We already know the coal companies didn't give a shit about them, and they're overcharging them for everything. Because it's like a monopoly. Like, we own your home, we own the store you shop at, we kind of own every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm. Short of, owning them as human beings, yeah.
So instead of purchasing items at the store, the coal company, so they're not paying at the register. So the coal company is actually going to be tallying up their purchases and taking it out of their monthly pay before they could get their hands on it. So this means that workers would tend to receive a very minimal, small salary. Sometimes they would receive nothing for all the back-breaking work they're doing. And then to make it even worse, a lot of people ended up just owing the company money. So they're in the negative.
Jesus.
And this was a tactic to make it so people were in debt to the companies and they would never have the means to leave. And this
sickening
situation, basically people describe it as the coal company enslaving these miners.
That's what I just said. Yeah, it's like everything short of owning them as enslaved people.
Yeah. So
but essentially they were.
And the Molly Maguires name, to go back to them, it originated from another secret society that started in the countryside of Ireland. And this group of young men would often disguise themselves by wearing women's clothing, and they would use powder on their face, and they would rub burnt corks, which I'm assuming it was for a look of makeup.
Okay.
And they pledged their allegiance to this mythical woman called Mistress Molly, and it was to symbolize
Momo.
Yep.
Amy's pup. Pup and joy.
But not really a thing of joy, though, because it was to symbolize the injustices that they faced on a daily basis and took away from their quality of living.
Oh. But why would they patronize her?
Well, because they were saying the mistress was also treated unfairly.
Okay.
And she faced injustice, too.
Got it.
So that's why they named themselves the Molly McGuires.
Okay.
So when the Civil War started, the miners were drafted in to join the war efforts. And they obviously were like, nope, this isn't this is not my place. This is like a rich man's war. It has nothing to do with me. And this is what led the secret society, the Molly McGuires, to start organizing and leading efforts to rebel. It started with what they called coffin notices. So coffin, you put in the ground.
Yep. Death.
Several supervisors or people who decided not to be part of the rebellion, mostly miners who aren't participating in the strikes, received death threats.
Damn.
So it's like anyone who didn't want to who was a worker and they decided not to side with them, or the supervisors or any kind of workers or anyone who owned the mines.
Wow. And
the Molly McGuires killed over 24 supervisors and workers.
Oh.
This led to Franklin Gowan, who was the president of the railroad company, to hire the Pinkerton Detective Agency to figure out who was part of the Molly McGuires secret society.
Pinkerton.
Yep, yeah, quite the name, right? The Pinkerton Agency hired a man. His name was James McParlin, and he was originally from Ireland, which was kind of genius because what he did was that he worked undercover. Like he was one of the Molly McGuires because he's like, I'm from Ireland. I'm a social outcast. I understand. So he joined the secret society and was undercover for more than 18 months. And this is how he was able to come forward and say, hey, this person's a member of the Molly McGuires. This person is too.
Ooh, you's a rat.
Pretty much. And when the men from the Molly McGuires had to attend court, I want to make a special note that there was no Irish Catholics who were appointed to be part of the jury. And the prosecuting attorneys, most of them worked for the mining and railroad companies. Mm-hmm. After these trials, 10 Molly McGuires were hanged on June 21st, 1877. And this sadly became known as Black Thursday, or the Day of the Rope.
Oh, God.
Following this event, this led to six men, which I wrote sex.
Hey, we're used to calling us sex files.
It must have been a typo. 6 men being hanged in another nearby community, and then 4 more, and then 10 more Molly McGuires were hanged over the next 3 years, which totals to 20 people.
Wow.
And historians, and I feel like you don't have to be a historian, because I agree that this terrible tragedy shows the flaws of the judicial system at the time, in which we know are like still prevalent today. In 1979, more than 100 years later, I thought this was really interesting. The leader, or what they call the king of Molly McGuires, John Kehoe, was granted a full pardon by the state of Pennsylvania. John Kehoe, who was not killed on Black Thursday, but however, a few years later, he was hanged because he was found guilty of killing one of the supervisors of the mining company.
Yikes.
He was hanged 5 days before Christmas and left behind his wife and his 5 daughters.
Oh, man.
The pardon, though, however, was all thanks to his great-grandson and his granddaughter, so the great-grandson's mother. Demanding that the state clear his name, and not only his name, but the family name. So Joe Wayne, the grandson, throughout his life, remembers people taunting him for being the grandson of a murderer. And
oh my God.
I'm assuming he lived in a small town, because he said he, throughout his life, received lots of remarks about his family. The family presented their case at the Pennsylvania Capitol, and along with the help of a lawyer and a few members from the Pennsylvania Labor History Society, they were able to demonstrate how John Kehoe was wrongfully accused.
Wow. All
Joe
those years
Wayne,
later, huh? All those years later, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool.
And Joe Wayne, the great-grandson, said during the trial, "You must remove the stigma that hangs over my family." And I feel like rightfully so. And I thought this was really cool. So Joe Wayne, the great-grandson, he runs a bar called the Hibernian House, which is the bar that John Kehoe, his great-grandfather, used to run.
Oh.
The king of the Molly McGuires.
Oh my God, that's badass. Yeah,
and he still stores his beers on the same bar that is over 150 years old.
I want to go. Let's go to PA, baby.
And then Joe Wayne, he honored the members of the Molly McGuires who were executed by having their names carved into the bar.
Oh, that's badass.
And Joe, in the article I read, he talks about, like, he received a lot of heat, not from just the community, but from his family. Because his family was kind of like, why do you need to bring up the past? Let's just move on. Kind of like one of those things, let's pretend it never happened in a sense. But he really felt the need to, like, clear his family's name. And today, the pardon of his great-grandfather is framed in the Hibernian House, where he still serves drinks. The day that the pardon was granted, he said that the bar was flooded with TV reporters, and in his words, he said they threw one hell of a party. So I thought the ending was a little bit heartwarming for kind of a sad story.
Hell yeah, it was.
But I really think, I'm not saying murder is ever okay, but they were put in, like I said, they were almost enslaved people. They had no freedoms, no rights.
Absolutely.
And after a certain point, it's like,
you can only put humans through so much for so long before we defend ourselves and our lives. Like, so kind of reminded me of, even though they weren't officially enslaved peoples, when you talked about the sugarcane revolt, right? Like, you can only treat people as subhuman for so long before we take our rights back.
Yeah, and it's like things like this kind of go, like, before we had those laws in place of, like, minimum wage, how many hours you're allowed to work. And not saying they went about it rightfully so, but I feel like it takes extreme action sometimes for extreme change to happen.
Yep. Exactly.
And I mean, they're being abused. Like, that's not the quality of life. They weren't really living a life.
Not even fucking close.
Anyway, so that was my story on the Molly McGuires.
Fascinating.
The secret society. Yeah, so I kind of think it goes in line with my history a little bit about some secret societies are formed more to change society.
Right. Yeah. And this one, you know, despite the means, it's almost like in this case, the means did justify the ends. Mm-hmm. Because of the labor laws. So, wow. Fascinating.
Yeah. I thought Secret Society was a cool episode.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun.
I knew nothing about the Freemasons, and I was like, well, I'm not going to look anything into them because I knew you were going to cover them.
I'm glad you didn't.
So it was all news to me. I know some people probably know a lot about them because they're pretty popular.
Yeah, I didn't know much, despite my grandfather being one, apparently, or allegedly. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy I got to see a glimpse into maybe what he was a part of, and I took it, like they said, the lens of, like, these were philosophical and, like, thinkers and doers and artists. And so that shit fascinates me. And that tracks with who my grandfather was. But then you see, in my case, obviously the means did not justify the ends to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. So, you know, can go both ways, as we know.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, I'm sure I thought even it'd be interesting to do secret societies that only women are in, because I think it's such a small number, but I think it'd be interesting. I know I highlighted one in Tuesday's episode, but I think there has to be more, so I think that would be kind of niche and interesting.
I'd love that, and maybe we can join one.
Join our secret society, Bewitched Banter.
That's right. It's no secret, though. Remember, y'all, we need your help to not be a secret. So, yeah, for that reason, I've never joined a sorority, actually, because it's just, I don't know. No, thank you.
I never had an interest, because to me, and I don't want to diss people who are in them, because I know there's lots of great people, but it felt weird to me, like, paying to have friends.
Yeah, that and all these stupid rules that you gotta follow.
Yeah, there's enough rules in life as it is. Like, I gotta show up to work on time. God damn it, why?
Oh, and I will expose one secret. So my college roommate and bestie, won't name any names. She was in a sorority ASU where part of the hazing inauguration or whatever ritual was they did do the Sharpie thing where they circled your quote-unquote fat with Sharpies.
That is disgusting.
Is that disgusting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and to this day, it certainly affected her. I know that.
Well, how would that not?
So that shit, I was like, well, thank God I dodged that.
Well, that's just like the tip of the iceberg of stuff they do. I mean,
yeah, it's disgusting.
I mean, I don't want to paint all sororities and fraternities. I'm sure there are some great ones out there, but yeah, it's just, there are several groups that, things like that, like, why would I put myself in that position to have that happen to me? And I don't like the whole, you have to try out to be in it. I don't want to be...
No, I'm not going to audition to be your goddamn friend.
Well, also, it's like, a lot of it's superficial, too. Like, they pick people who look like them, and there's so many problems with it.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we can go on a whole other ep and tangent on sororities for sure. But, yeah, that was really fascinating. Thank you you made me proud to be Irish, honestly. I had my sad German story, and but I'm proud from the Irish side.
On that note,
peace, bewitches. We hope you have a great week, and don't join any nefarious secret societies.
Peace. Thanks for listening. Check us out on Instagram or bewitchedbanter.com. Suggestions for the show? Email us at bewitchedbanter@gmail.com. Credits, music, Phantom Fun by Jonathan Boyle from premiumbeat.com. Podcast edited and produced by Krista Hins and Amy Holt. As always, if you enjoyed, please rate, review, and subscribe.